A deal on Dickens, who could resist? A stack of Austen, warmly kissed. Golden Age crime tales twist and turn, every page a treasure to learn. Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea, reading always feels so free.
Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. As you can tell by the hat, it is time for a review for one of my June on the Range books. And the book that I am reviewing this time is True Grit by Charles Portis. In preparation for this video, I did a quick little search on Charles Portis, and I came up with an entry from the Britannica website. So his name was in full Charles McCall Portis. He was born on December 28th, 1933 in El Dorado, Arkansas, and he died February 17th, 2020 in Little Rock, Arkansas. He is best known for the novel of True Grit, which he wrote in 1968, which inspired two popular film adaptations, 1969, which is of course the best with John Wayne, and the, in my opinion, unnecessary 2010 recreation. So I can't even remember the big name actor who's in it because I simply don't care. Portis grew up in a series of small towns in southern Arkansas, and he debuted as a novelist with Norwood in 1966. The film was created in 1970. I was going to say I was pretty sure I recognized that name. True Grit is set in Arkansas in the 1870s, and it owed its bestseller status in part to its serialization in the Saturday Evening Post. It earned comparisons to Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn and is considered Portis's masterpiece. I will be returning to that notion of it being like a Huckleberry Finn story. After more than a decade of virtual inactivity, Portis returned to the literary scene with The Dog of the South in 1979. He created another one after that called Masters of Atlantis in 1985. He had Gringos in 1991. And it looks like he had Escape Velocity, a Charles Portis miscellany. Yeah, I'm sure that's how it's pronounced. It contained various writings, and that was released 2012, so that would have been... Okay, no, he was still alive. I was going to say, I thought that was maybe released after his death, but no, that he died in 2020, so I'm guessing like shorts... Oh, it says essays and short fiction. And they state that Portis portrayed the restless pursuit of belief or adventure as emblematic of the American character. So that's just a little bit of background on the author, Charles Portis. And the reason I was so interested in getting the background on this author is I noticed something while reading True Grit that it felt very correct period-wise. I actually wondered if he was a historian because of how accurate it felt. And it doesn't appear that he had any sort of historical background. It says that he worked as a reporter and he frequently covered the civil rights movement. He was a Marine and served in the Korean War, and his bachelor's degree was in journalism. So he also worked for the newspaper's London Bureau. So I'm not quite sure if he just had an interest in history or what it is, because he was actually pretty accurate historically, but not in the way that some historical fictions end up, where you really notice like they're over explaining things and it's just like it actually takes you out of the book. That's not the way that True Grit made me feel. And there are a couple instances that I will point at. One of them was, there was a reference made to a politician, a Catholic politician whose last name was Smith, who had run for president. And, hang on. Okay, here it is. This particular section caught my attention. Some people say, well, there were more men in the country at a time who looked like Cleveland than did not. Still, that is how he looked. Cleveland was once a sheriff himself. He brought a good deal of misery to land in the Panic of '93, but I am not ashamed to own that my family supported him and has stayed with the Democrats right on through, up and to including Governor Alfred Smith, and not only because of Joe Robinson. Papa used to say that the only friends we had down here after the war were the Irish Democrats in New York. Thad Stevens and the Republican gang would have starved us all out if they could. It is all in the history books. So the just sort of offhand mention of Governor Alfred Smith, it brings to mind, and actually this might not be the Smith that ran for president. This might have been a different Smith, but I'm pretty sure, because this is the one that, let's see. Hi, sorry about that. Didn't know what happened, but I couldn't find a book I wanted to reference for this part. Okay, so I mentioned that the author mentions that they mentioned Alfred Smith. I wanted to double check my facts that I had remembered. I can't find the book that I read it in now. I can only find the other book written by the same author. The book is The Poison Squad by Deborah Bloom, and the author mentioned Alfred Smith in that book. Now, this book is set in the 1870s, but Maddie would have definitely been alive, because it seems like this book is supposed to be written from when Maddie is an older woman. And Alfred Smith was a Democrat, but was a Catholic, and that was part of what hurt his campaign, as well as him running on an anti-prohibition ticket. Like that was his big thing, was he was anti-prohibition. He was connected with the corrupt Tammany Hall, and he lost the presidential race of 1928 to Herbert Hoover. Now, in 1919, when Alfred Smith's career as New York governor started, Maddie would have been 60. In 1928, she would have been almost 70. So she very well could have been alive. So this, just that random little fact that's slid in there, absolutely works for character consistency and correctness of time period. The other thing that I noticed was that just the feel of it just, okay, so I'm also, besides it making me think of the Poisoner Squad, it also made me think of this Truman by David McCullough, and I'm trying to find, now this is actually set in Kansas, but some of the same feeling is there. In Truman, there is also mentioned a strong loyalty to the Democratic Party, the feeling of loyalty to the Confederacy, and the really this still the feeling of ill will towards those who had fought against the Confederacy for the Union. So this was, when they're mentioning it, this was during the Civil War and then after. So this is for Truman's grandparents who were Civil War, and then his parents who were children during the Civil War. And there was still that strong feeling like you are a Democrat, you are still very proudly Confederate, and there was, at least in the Kansas area, a strong anti-Catholic feeling. And one of the things that made me think that, as well as her mentioning Alfred Smith as up to including kind of like a, well, in spite of the fact, that he was, a Catholic candidate, the other thing is she made a point of mentioning about the judge that she mentioned about the judge that the judge was a tall, big man with blue eyes and brown billy goat beard, and he seemed to me to be old, although he was only around 40 years of age at the time. His manner was grave. On his deathbed, he asked for a priest and became a Catholic. That was his wife's religion. It was his own business and none of mine. If you had sentenced 160 men to death and had seen around 80 of them swing, then maybe at the last minute you would feel the need of some stronger medicine than the Methodists could make. It is something to think about. To further support my point, Maddie says on page 74 of my edition of True Grit, "Thank God for the Harrison narcotics law, also for the Volstead Act. I know Governor Smith is wet, but that is because of his race and religion, and he is not personally accountable for that. I think his first loyalty is to his country, and not to the infallible Pope of Rome. I am not afraid of Al Smith for a minute. He is a good Democrat, and when he is elected, I believe he will do the right thing if he is not hamstrung by the Republican gang and bullied into an early grave, as was done to Woodrow Wilson, the greatest Presbyterian gentleman of the age." So, the things that Maddie says and doesn't say, what she implies, it all feels very historically accurate without banging you over the head with it. Also, Maddie has a very almost prim way of narrating. She's constantly throwing out Bible verses, moralizing. It does sound like an older woman telling a story of when she was younger. Although even 14-year-old Maddie has this kind of like prim sense of righteousness. This strong conviction that she is right and that she's gonna, just her sense of righteousness and justice. But the comparison that the article that I read and is actually mentioned in the afterword is that True Grit is, to a certain extent, like a Huckleberry Finn story. Now, it's been a very long time since I read Huckleberry Finn, but while I was reading, I didn't think so much of Huckleberry Finn as I did To Kill a Mockingbird. It was another story of a older woman looking back at her time as a child. Now, Scout was quite a bit younger in this during the time period that is being recounted. She was just starting school, that kind of thing. So I think the oldest she gets is about 7, maybe 8. I'd have to look to be certain. Whereas, of course, Maddie's 14 in this. But that was more of what it made me think of. I don't know if it gets compared to Huckleberry Finn because of the more, I don't know, I am not quite sure. It's like I said, it's been a while since I've thought of Huckleberry Finn, maybe because it's an adventure type story. But like I said, I've more thought of To Kill a Mockingbird, maybe because it is a feminine voice, although it is written by a man. And I thought that Charles Portis did a very good job of accurately portraying a older woman's voice, but at times you forget that it's the older woman telling the story because you get immersed in young Maddie's voice. But it doesn't feel jarring when you get reminded, like, no, this is an older woman telling this story. And that's the same thing that Harper Lee manages with To Kill a Mockingbird. They do tell quite different stories. I mean, you could, yeah, they tell different stories. There is still elements of justice to it, but Maddie's story is very much more of a revenge story, whereas To Kill a Mockingbird is about, you know, being, learning to grow up and to do what is right, even when it is hard and everyone is against you. But not in like a revenge-seeking way. It talks about, honestly, the quieter strength. But yeah, so that was more of what I thought of when I was thinking about the narration style, was more of a To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, to go beyond the comparison, to go beyond what I felt was a very rich and historically accurate feeling of the novel, I did feel that, for one thing, I thought the John Wayne movie captured a good portion of the book. They really got the feel of the book. I think the casting was done well. I did picture the famous John Wayne scene with the reins in his teeth when they got to that part in the book. I did enjoy having the story told through Maddie's point of view, though. It gives you a little bit more insight into her character, even though you do get quite a bit in the movie, and I think that is well done. But you get more of an idea of what drives Maddie, as in, like, yes, it's this feeling of this is her father and I want to see justice done for him, but you see just her as a full character, the quoting the Bible verses, the almost stiff-necked, like, this is the way things are done, this is the, you know, she has a very definite idea of right and wrong, and she has some trouble seeing other points of view. Very strong-minded, and it's done well in the movies, but there is that extra layer that you get in the books because you're actually in Maddie's head. She is telling you what's going on. Now, I would be interested in, during a reread, if I would notice any unreliability with the narration, because that is sometimes something I notice with a well-written first-person story, is that you sometimes will have a unreliable narrator that adds that little bit of an extra layer of what's going on, that you can't always trust your main character's perceptions. So I'd be interested if, during a second reading of True Grit, if I would notice some little holes in Maddie's perceptions. If maybe she's not quite as perceptive or aware of things as she thinks she is, even, you know, a good 40-some, 50-some, 60-some years later. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I ended up reading a good portion of it one time. I had read it when I was on the exercise bike, and then I just, when I was done with my time on there, I just sat there and continued to read, because I was starting to get to really where it was starting to heat up. They had already left the town, the Texas Ranger, Maddie, and Rooster Cogburn. So you were really getting into the adventure part of things. I ended up giving this I think I gave it a 4.5. I really enjoyed this. I will reread it. Like I said, I'm interested in seeing the things I will pick up with a second go-round with Maddie's narration and with any other historical clues that I might pick up as I continue to read American history of that era. I'm not sure if, it just seems like Charles Portis did a lot of research. I don't know if some of it was just things that came through sort of osmosis through family history, and that it just came from living in that area, that he just sort of absorbed this history and feeling of the time. But I mean, this book was written, the copyright is 1968, and the events mentioned here, like I said, is 1870s. And then you have, when they mention Alfred Smith, at earliest you're talking about 1919, and for the loss of to Herbert Hoover in the presidential election, it's 1928. So I'm not sure if that's what she's referring to when she talks about Herbert Hoover. I mean, talks about Alfred Smith, but it could be, and that's what's interesting, that adult Maddie could be making just a sort of throwaway comment about how long her family has been supported in the Democratic Party. And it's just these little tidbits that give you the historical flavor and make you forget that you're not reading a book that was actually written during the era. In my opinion, I think that it goes beyond just like your normal historical fiction. Charles Portis went that extra mile, and I really appreciate that. I don't really have too much more to say. I hope that ended up being somewhat coherent. I did have to stop the video and try to find a couple of books, one of which was, whoopsie, there goes True Grit. Come here. One of which I couldn't find, which was The Poisoner's Handbook by Deborah Bloom. If I remember, I will try to put it up probably in this corner here. I really enjoyed that book. It was talking about, well, I have a review on it. I'll try to put it at the end of the video because I did a full-on review of that book. But yeah, I just appreciated the historical accuracy, and I went and I researched Alfred Smith, and that was the other pause, was trying to find The Poisoner's Handbook and then looking up Alfred Smith to make sure what my memory was correct. And then I had to pull Truman out to refresh my memory of the area. But like True Grit, where Truman's family was one of those territories that were, you know, on the edge. You know, it was one of the ones that was really affected by the war, and had the loyalties to the Democratic Party, and just they had a lot of the same feel. So yeah, I'm rambling. I hope that I was somewhat coherent. I hope that you will find that you will want to read True Grit as well. I did go and rewatch the John Wayne scene with the reins in his mouth. I think I mentioned that earlier. I can't remember now what I've mentioned. I've paused this video so many times to look up different things. But yeah, so if you enjoyed just a good narration, first of all, a Western adventure, but one that has a really accurate historical feeling, I would recommend this novel. I would actually be interested in someone who is even more familiar with the era, what they would think, if they would agree with me about the accuracy of this novel, and that it does it without being too showy about it. Makes it feel, like I said, like it was written during the era. So that's all I have to say about True Grit. I hope that you decide to read it, and I will see you again for the next video. God bless. Bye.
Books keep coming home with me. Piles so tall, they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea. Reading always feels so free.